This podcast is a product of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. Nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. To find a collaborative professional near you, visit www.collaborativepracticeflorida.com. Thank you. Today we have with us David Smith. He's an independent registered representative, fiduciary investment advisory representative, Series 7 and Series 66. He's also a financial organizer and coordinator, a chartered financial consultant, licensed life, health, and variable annuity agent in several states. And he started helping people answer questions about their money back in 2006. He was a field agent with MetLife until late 2012, when he opened up Sand Oak Financial Partners, his financial planning business. And he's currently serving as the chair of the board of advisors for the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts. So he's the money man when it comes to the collaborative process. So I know that's just some of your credentials, but you know so much about finances, and you've been helping people now through the collaborative process, help them with their finances, not only while they're in the process of getting divorced, but helping them with that question, what now? Now that I'm divorced, I know what my budget is. I know how much money I do or don't have. Now what? You help them see what the picture is going to look like after. So thank you for being here today. And would you share with us your story as to how you became so involved with collaborative and the financial planning process?
Sure. I'm happy to do that, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me and asking me today and going through that rather lengthy introduction. But yeah, I've been at this for a while, like you said, since 2006. And then after a few years, probably about 3 years after I started my Sand Oak Financial Partners business, I literally was sitting in my office. I was reflecting back on the fact that I experienced my own divorce way back in 1980. That was my second year. I was actually a sophomore in dental school, had only been married for 2 years. I was also thinking about in my own family, there were 7 divorces total between my mom, dad, my sister, myself. And also concerning my own family, I lost it was myself and my sister, so my only sister and her daughter, my only niece. I lost both of those family members to suicide. And so lots of stress related things going on in my family. And so I was thinking about what could I actually do? I've got this financial knowledge and the registrations and various things that you mentioned. What can I do to actually help people through their own divorce process? So I started doing some research, and I found out at the time, this area, Northwest Florida, Panama City, where I live, was probably one of the highest divorce rates in the state and around the country. So I looked into and found an organization, the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts, have a designation called the CDFA, which is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. So I got that designation, did the coursework for that. I opened up my second business, which is Sand Oak Divorce Solutions, expanded into divorce financial planning services. So yeah, total about 17 years in finance, but about 8 of it in the divorce financial planning space specifically.
Well, that's a lot, and that's a wonderful story. So how did you start with collaborative? How did you know that was the way to help people through their divorces and their financial issues while divorcing?
Sure. Yeah, when back in 2016, at that time, there were no collaborative groups in the Northwest Florida area, the Panhandle. And there were several of us that got together and said, let's bring some training here. We'd heard about collaborative, the process. All of us had never been trained. So we brought that training here, got the initial collaborative training in 2016, because I was really looking for more of a peaceful resolution process. I really don't want to be involved in litigation. I don't do any testifying or expert witness testimony. And so I completed that training. A couple of years after that, I went through the 40-hour mediation training, became a certified family mediator for Florida. And so I've joined actually 3 different practice groups across Florida. I have my own group, which is the Collaborative Divorce Professionals here in Panama City. A couple of months ago, I joined the Capital Collaborative Group in Tallahassee. I've got a couple of cases going on virtually with them. And then I'm actually a member of the same group that you're in, Catherine, the Palm Beach Academy of Collaborative Professionals. So meeting other professionals around the state, getting to interact with them, learning more about what they're doing, the successes they've had, all has kind of brought me to where I am now, as far as being involved in the collaborative process.
Will you please explain, as the financial person in the collaborative process, the neutral financial professional in the collaborative process, explain your role. What do you do? What's your job?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of 2 neutrals typically on a full team of professionals that are assisting the couple to go through the divorce process. The collaborative process, primarily, that's a process of self-determination, but with the team, giving advice, suggestions, options for the families to consider. And so there's each have their own collaboratively trained attorney. There's a collaborative mental health professional facilitator. And so me as the financial neutral, I've got the ability, I'm allowed to meet with either separately or together, both of the parties. I help them to identify and get clarity on their entire financial picture, what they actually have, what's available for division. Many times in a marriage, one or the other of them hasn't been that involved in the finances, so they might need some education, just some realizations as to what they have. Helping them also to make sure they understand the consequences financially, long-term, short-term, tax consequences of dividing retirement accounts. What do they do with IRAs? How do they handle their home, options for the house, calculating child support, spousal support, all those kinds of things. So anything really related to answering divorce financial questions, that's my role. That's what I want to assist them with. That's what I'm there for as part of the team.
There's a word that comes up, QDRO, which stands for Qualified Domestic Relations Order. I know when that's come up in a case, even when you weren't on my team or I've just had a case with it, I've come to you for help to understand what it is and what needs to take place and how that all gets calculated out. Can you please explain a little bit about what a QDRO is and your role in the collaborative process or in the financial process as to what needs to take place?
Sure. Yeah. So as I was talking about before in part of my history, a couple of years after I completed the mediation training, I still felt like there was a little bit more that I wanted to learn, and I was still seeing some areas like you're referring to here that I felt that I could help to support better. So I researched and found the Certified QDRO Specialist designation, CQS, and I got that in 2020. So what that's allowed me to do, and what I found is, and having that, is to be able to come into matters collaborative or as a consultant very early on, and when there are retirement plans that are involved and so forth. Well, let me back up just a minute. Let me tell you, I'll explain what a QDRO is, but to explain that first, let me tell you what it applies to. A QDRO's Qualified Domestic Relations Orders actually only apply to retirement plans that fall or that are governed under what's called ERISA, ERISA. That's the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. Long name, but what that put in place were protections for employees and participants in private sector plans that were voluntarily opened by the business. So those protections got put in place. So when you're in a divorce and you're looking at dividing those types of retirement accounts like 401ks, 403bs, et cetera, a plan administrator that oversees the plan is the one that actually does that division. So a quadro is a document that's signed by the court. It contains particular language in a format that directs the plan administrator, provides and guidance as to how to divide that account. But every plan is different. They've all got their own rules, fees involved, and so forth and so on. So the plan administrator has to qualify, actually approve that document. So I can come in early on and do the research for the plan, convey that information to the parties and their attorneys, and let everybody know what options they have and the consequences of those decisions. So that when it comes to writing the agreements and putting particular language in there, those topics have already been covered and discussed, and you really lessen the likelihood of surprises that are being found out later. I know you and I, several years ago, we were sitting at the Florida Academy Collaborative Professionals Conference and talking about, some cases. So that's another area where I feel I can bring some value and really like participating in.
And so for people who are listening, just name a few of the big administrators in the state of Florida who people are saying, oh my gosh, that would apply to me, because they still might not understand whether or not, a quadro would be necessary. So what are some of the big plan administrators that you've had to get quadros approved by?
Yeah. Well, a big one, of course, is the Florida retirement system. And when you consider the options that employees have or participants in those plans have, whether they're in the drop program or not, so that's a big one. And then, of course, you just get into larger employers, private employers. It could be defense contractors, various organizations like that. So now, again, those quadros apply. That specific document applies to those private plans. But there are similar documents. They're not necessarily called quadros, but they're similar documents for military pension divisions, the federal employee system, so federal employees, the thrift savings plan, all of those plans and retirement accounts can be divided as well using similar documents to quadros. It's just the names are a little different, the formats are different, the concept is basically the same. But if that document is not provided to the plan administrator, then or that document is actually what allows, as I said, the employee to be able to provide a portion of their account to the alternate payee or the former spouse. And that also allows them to do that without paying any early withdrawal penalties if they're too young, typically under the age of 59 and a half. So it's a long process but it needs to be done for the former spouse or alternate payee to be able to receive the money that they were awarded in the divorce.
So I know you were in the military, and then I know you have a special heart for those in the military, especially going through the divorce process. So can you explain a little bit about what makes military divorces a little different than, a traditional divorce that we're all familiar with?
Yeah. Military divorces are kind of their own animal. It starts with the terminology, just the language, the jargon that's used, understanding what things mean. You have differences in pay centers and processes, paperwork, and so forth. Like, for example, the Coast Guard falls under Department of Homeland Security. Army and Air Force is under DFAS, or Defense Finance and Accounting Service. So there's a lot to understand with the language. There are particular rules that come into play when how can a former spouse receive a portion of the pension benefit from a service member? If that can be paid directly to them or not. How do they qualify, or do they qualify for health care and other benefits post-divorce? How do you calculate things differently, whether an active duty member a military member is still on active duty, if they're retired, if they're reservist, there's all those different nuances. And of course, you got jurisdictional. I don't think I mentioned that. That's the legal side, but where do you actually file? And so there are a lot of things like that. And there's some particular financial issues too, in addition to all of what I said. If you'd like me to take a minute to add that in there as well, I can do that. So looking at pension division, do you do it now? Do you defer it till later when the person actually retires? Do you value the pension, that stream of lifetime payments, and offset, or the other spouse gets something of equivalent value? There's a program called SBP, Survivor Benefit Program. That's an election made by the military members so that if they pass away first, the named beneficiary receives a portion of their benefit. And how is that paid for? You have to divide up thrift savings plan accounts. How do you account for loans? GI Bill educational benefits. There's a transfer of entitlement. The service member can actually transfer that educational benefit to a spouse or their kids. And then lastly, but certainly not least, you have to consider the impact of VA disability payments. VA disability payments are not divisible as far as property goes, but they are used for calculations of spouse support and child support. So when a person changes, the service member changes their percentage of their VA disability, whether they're married or not, how many children they have, how old the kids are, all of that impacts the actual payment that they receive. So as you can see and hear, there's a lot of considerations specifically around military divorces. But you're right. When I think back on the fact that I've actually been out of the Air Force now longer than I've served, that's kind of hard to believe. But I'm very happy with my time. I was proud I was able to serve and enjoyed all the travel that my wife and kids that we all got to do together.
I know you're also a part of Divorce Options. So would you tell us about Divorce Options?
Yeah, I
I
was
know that's really
introduced.
switching gears, but
Yeah,
I
no,
want to get all your knowledge.
well, that's an important part because I believe again I sort of mentioned this earlier, but education is very important to me, and I think it's vital for people to have information that they need to make the best decisions for their family. So I was introduced to Divorce Options probably about a year and a half or more so ago. It's a general educational workshop that was developed, introduced originally in California, has now been adopted for Florida, for the divorce process in Florida. And this workshop generally takes a couple of hours, 2 to 2.5 hours. And it's an unbiased overview of the legal, emotional, and financial aspects of divorce. And it's presented typically from the perspectives of 3 different family law professionals. There's an attorney, obviously for the legal parts, a financial professional, and a mental health professional or a child specialist. And so as part of that workshop, there are 4 different options that are covered, that are discussed. Let me start over just a second here. The Divorce Options Workshop can help people in a very big way, because once they actually decide that they're going to get divorced, the next most important decision that they're going to need to make is how they're going to do it. What's that process going to look like? What process are they going to follow? Are they going to have additional professionals, if any, involved in helping them? And many people, a lot of folks think that hiring attorneys and, just kind of fighting it out that's the way they see on television. They think that's the way it is. But in reality, for a family, depending on the complexity of their situation, financial situation, how much control do they want to have over the cost, the speed, the privacy in the process, if they're business owners, for example, or professionals, politicians, someone that wants to keep things private, the collaborative process, mediation, and others can help them to do that. So all of these things, learning more about that, having that information, going through Divorce Options can help them to hear that information, ask questions, and just be able to move forward, in a process that works best for them.
How can someone find out about one of the Divorce Options workshops is taking place?
The easiest way to do that is that there's actually a statewide website for Florida that's been set up. And so anyone can access that website, and I can provide that. That is www.divorceoptionsflorida.com, all one word. Again, www.divorceoptionsflorida.com. You can go there, you can see when the workshops are scheduled, who's providing them, and you can sign up right there. You'll get right now, currently, as we record this, these are all being done virtually and at no expense, again, currently. But we hope we can do live sessions in the future, perhaps. But you get your Zoom link and you can come and participate. If you want to come more than once, that's fine. If you're not able to stay for the entire time, that's fine too. But all four options, the kitchen table method, it's called, or do it yourself, mediation, collaborative divorce, and the traditional litigation models, all of those will be discussed concerning the challenges and the advantages of each one of those. And again, this is an unbiased, no particular method or process is being pushed over the other. You get to hear the information and they can decide for themselves what direction they want to take.
Thank you. Thank you for all of this information. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much again. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate it. I hope the listeners will find it valuable, and I'm happy to do it. And it's a beautiful day in Northwest Florida, and I hope it is where you are too.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kathy.